Right, I'm delighted to be here with Michael Jacobson, author of The Business of Creativity.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Oh, wonderful, thank you.
Excellent.
How are you?
And very well. I'm very
Excellent.
excited to catch up with you on publication week. So it's just come out.
This is the week for us, fresh off the printers.
Fresh off the printers.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the book. I know you're an entrepreneur, business mentor. You're known for being involved in bringing Dirty Dots to the stage, being successful around the world. Today, you are an entrepreneur helping people, and you've just written this particular book, The Business of Creativity. What was the inspiration behind it, and what's it about?
The inspiration behind it is really the business of creativity tries to marry up business with creativity in a simpler sense.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed through growing up in the entertainment business, through growing up in the creative sector, and through doing business in the creative sector, is that there's often a disconnect both from the creative person's point of view and from the business community's point of view between business and creativity. What I mean by that is a lot of creative people believe that they can only pursue their passion as a hobby. They have to work in a job that they don't necessarily like or care for, and then go home and after 5 be a 5 to 9er, and what I mean trying to do their passion but to pay for it from their job. What they don't necessarily realise is that they really can commercialise, not in every case but in many cases, and no reason why it can't be in the vast majority, 90% of the cases, they can commercialise their passion, they can commercialise their creative desire. And so what the book tries to do is to put in very creative terms, and in terms that a creative will hopefully enjoy reading, but put to them that they can commercialise.
I think that's so powerful what you're saying, because if you think about it, of course, it makes sense, because some of the world's biggest industries are creative business. The film industry, fashion industries, these are creative industries, aren't they? But you're right, at the same time, often business thinks, and creators often think, oh, business isn't for me. So I like the fact that someone with your wherewithal is bringing these things kind of together. So guide us through what somebody who's picking up this book would find, and who, as a creative, should be reading this particular book.
So the creative sector really, you pointed out certainly a couple of the subsectors, and it covers. You've got fashion, you've got architecture, you've got landscape gardeners, you've got musicians, you've got music publishers, you've got digital media, advertising. This is not an exhaustive list. That is just to name a few. So it's quite a big list. And if you look back over the centuries, over the millennia, really, without putting it too broadly, it is people from the creative sector and creative sector creations that we're still talking about. We're still talking about the amphitheatres in Roman times. We're still talking about Emily Bronte. We're still talking about architect Indigo Jones, William Shakespeare, and I'm sure next century people will still be talking about the Beatles and Rolling Stones and so on. So these are businesses. These are people which become businesses, which certainly stand the test of time, as well as being creative. They have a real cultural stake in the ground. And whether they're affecting millions of people's lives, or thousands or hundreds, it doesn't matter. The point is that creative businesses touch people's lives. Full stop. It doesn't matter how many people. That's just what they do. So the book is trying to take a creative person. Many creative people are brilliant business people. This is not to say that they're not. That they're not. But what I do know about most creative people is that they don't like numbers. If you go and talk to even some of the most successful people in that sector, whether they're smart with numbers or not, they generally say, well, we don't like numbers. We leave that to the CFO or so on. We just want to create. And that's fine, but what this tries to do is to educate them so that they can go through, and it's directed at start-up and at growing businesses, and to educate them, to walk them through anything from the financials, from the psychological aspect of business, successes and failures, examples of what can succeed, what can fail, and also all the different facets that go into the overall marketing mix. And obviously this is not exclusive to creative, but there is a misunderstanding with many businesses starting up and growing businesses that marketing and advertising are one and the same thing. Clearly, marketing in its purest sense is actually taking your product to market, and so this tries to walk them through all of the aspects of that, but in a way that doesn't bombard them with managerial speak.
I like that.
Make their eyes glaze over.
And that's one of the things I really like about the book. I mean, I'm just 50 or so pages into it, but I like the fact that you give very rich overview, give rich examples, and you also start off with things like the vision and the mission, and being clear about that, because it's so important, isn't it? You've got to know where it is that you're going, and also that something that might appeal also to somebody who's a creative. That vision about what the business is.
Well, yes, I know you're a big believer in that too, Rasheed, and there's no question that the vision, the mission, and these types of and the values, what's the need in the marketplace, these types of areas, I think are critical to before you start any business, and they do go hand in hand with, particularly with creative businesses, but all businesses, in my view, should be looking at this, and not just startup businesses, but even advanced businesses should be continually looking at what's our vision or what's our mission. If you look at, a perfect example, and it really is actually a business in the creative sector, but if you look at Kodak, which went into Chapter 11 in the US, really because they lost their way. One, I'm not sitting here saying that, I'm in a position to be questioning the board of directors of Kodak, but what I'm saying is one can make an assumption that they, as a New York Stock Exchange listed creative sector company, kind of lost their vision. They forgot, they lost where they were going, and as a result, they didn't keep up with the technological changes in the market, and they went into administration.
And it's interesting and very powerful what you're saying, because also I find when I'm coaching lots of businesses or business owners where they started off perhaps then with their dream and so on, there comes a point where hopefully they started off with a visionary, but I often point out to them that I say to them often, particularly when they're going to grow or they're going to take on staff or that they're just wanting to launch more products or more services, this is the point where you've got to become a visionary. And I think there's a point where they've got to have that sense of a vision about where they're going, because then who they need to be or the people that they need to bring on board the business, they've got to have that sense of that, because if they don't have that, who's going to have that? How else are people going to tie into what it is that you're about as a business owner? Do you find, one thing I want to ask you is that, from your experience with this particular book, are you keen for, you've been involved in many businesses whereby there's the scale and businesses have become very, very successful. Of course, many creators might just start themselves and their sewing machine or themselves and their writing. Are you very keen to encourage some creatives who might just be starting up to perhaps dream bigger and to consider how far they could take their business? Is that one of the reasons why you've written this particular?
Well, absolutely, yes. What I believe is really important is, yes, dreaming big. One can put it like that, starting from the end and working backwards, and just literally dreaming, full stop. I talk about dreaming, and I'm a big believer in dreaming, because if you don't sit down and just create the headspace to dream, that is creating in its purest form, and every business person should be doing that, and the most successful business people do that. Whether you call it brainstorming, strategizing, meditating, dreaming, standing in the shower in the morning, letting the thoughts pop into your head, it doesn't really matter.
Yes.
Everybody has different ways of going about it, and some people have specific triggers where you can sit down and actually bring on the states of consciousness that require these sorts of mindsets. Some people just let things pop into their head in the shower or when they're driving or sitting on the tube or whatever. But the point is that you must dream and visualize where you want your business to go. If you don't know where you want it to go, none of your customers will, none of your stakeholders will, and you certainly won't find. You'll have difficulty, I think, finding investors. You might find investors, but it will be difficult to find investors who are congruent with what's in your heart, because if you haven't articulated it and put it out there into the world, what is actually in your heart as to where you want your business to go, how do you expect somebody to come on board that is going to be like-minded? It's not going to be possible.
Got you. And I think one thing I'm very keen to ask you before we close, and I would imagine it's something that you focus on quite a lot of the book, I guess what makes you unusual in business and as a creative in business is that a lot of your starting point was that you were interested in business, you were interested in real estate, you were interested in the finance side, you had expertise around that, as well as from family in terms of that, in terms of entertainment. Presumably what people find in the book is a lot of the structural stuff that you need to put in place, because I'd imagine one of the challenges that can be there in many creatives, not all necessarily, but often what might happen is almost the reverse of what we talked about, where there's the dreaming's there, but actually the reality of actually how am I going to get my business from my idea in terms of it being a reality, whether it's just going to be me forever, or whether it's going to be that I'm going to license from across the world or have a chain of shops or just sell broadly, that's not often in place. So presumably one of the things that's really that you'll be hitting them hard with the book is what are the kind of things that you're wanting to do. Exactly as you said, if you're wanting to attract investment or if you're wanting to look at different ways to get your business out there. And I think you take them through 4 or 5 different ways in which businesses can grow early on. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, very true. I mean, look, just like, you can't spend your whole life on holidays, and eventually, if you're on holidays for an extended period of time, you start longing to be back in your own bed and in your own environment and walking your own streets and doing your own things. You can't spend your whole life dreaming and visualizing either, because you'll end up, going off with the fairies. You do have to focus on the business context as well. So it's a balance, and that's exactly what the book is trying to marry up. So what does take people through, as you just articulated, is those concise steps as to once they do have the vision and know where they want to go, they work through their mission, how they actually going to get there in general terms. Then it walks them through the practical steps to take this from something which they're doing in their garage or in their back room or on their dinner table, as to how to actually attract investment, and not just how but when. Some people go for investment too early. They go for investment when they don't even need it. In fact, it's really one of the most common misconceptions, I think, about starting a business. Not just in the creative sector, but in many sectors, people they think they need investment, and they don't always need it, and they get very concerned in their own mindset. How are we ever going to raise it? It's all too hard.
Or they think they'll get it. In some cases, or they might think that they might get investment, whereby if their type of businesses are just always going to be them, they haven't got a business that for somebody to invest in isn't seen as scalable. So that's also interesting, isn't it?
It may not be investable. So I try and talk through in the book how that can become investable, and how they can actually get themselves poised at the right time and in the right way to get investment. And we also go through, it also outlines the right channels, because for some people, for many people, and understandably so, it's just a very big grey area. I mean, where do you find people that are going to invest in your business? Do you just walk the streets and look for people? Where do you find people? So I try to point people in the right direction where they can find that sort of investment, and so that marrying that up with the business sort of information and the financial information, when they do talk to investors, they are savvy to the degree that they need to be. They don't need to be experts, they don't need to be financial accountants, but at least they can understand, they can have an educated conversation without having to rely on simply talking, getting other advice. They actually understand the basics, at least, in their mind. But the other thing that I do focus on is that people should try and get some sort of advice, whether it be from a mentor, a family member who's in business, a friend who's in business, because business is one of the main areas where people, in some degree, have a problem with getting advice or telling people that they have advice. And there's no elite athlete in the world who doesn't have a trainer or a coach. There's no actor, even top Hollywood actors, who don't have a director or an acting coach or a vocal coach or a dialect coach. And there's no problem with it. It's the way it is. But in business, people are sometimes a little embarrassed to say, I've got a mentor, or I've got a coach, or I've got. And to me, I think it's those barriers need to be blown away completely, because everybody needs somebody that can talk to them and help lift them higher. It doesn't matter what level of business you're at, and even at the highest level, that's effectively what a board of directors is. It's like a bunch of mentors, to support and advise and counsel the CEO, and so everybody needs that. So you've got to emulate from the start, as a startup, a growing business. You have to emulate how the successful companies do it.
Well, I really like that. I think that you've done such a rich job of giving us an insight into this book. And I think one of the other things that I'll just say before we close is I like the fact that you've given people what they need. You haven't given them too much detail that they're going to necessarily get lost in. I like the fact that you also give quite a lot of helpful pointers, useful organisations and so on, that's also going to help them on their way. And I think that point that you made about getting support and being clear about where they're going and emulating of that sense of where it is they're going, what other companies do, is really, really invaluable. So I want to wish you all the best with the book.
Rasheed.
Michael, all the best. And I certainly would be recommending this to creatives. And I wish that back in the day when I was a singer and performer that I'd read something like that. But
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Take care.